Hi everyone, and welcome back to Farrand on Film. And today I'm bringing you a 4K review of the Batman. So I've been sent a copy of Batman by Warner Brothers UK. It gets its UK release on the 13th of June, which is this coming Monday. It's already available on digital download now, but it's coming to 4K UHD, Blu-ray, DVD, and VOD on the 13th of June. So all I'm going to do is give you some sort of insight onto the 4K transfer, like I do in all the usual 4K reviews. And then I'm going to really do a bit of a deep dive into the special features, because as you can see on the sticker on the front, it says includes over 2 hours of extra content. I'm just going to take this slipcase off because it's very similar. Okay, it's actually identical. So the cover, as you can see, was one of the variant posters, one of the UK posters. Spine there, pretty standard. And the back cover, just to kind of give you a bit of a glimpse on the back cover. So a killer targets Gotham's elite to send in the Batman on an investigation. As evidence mounts, he must forge new relationships, unmask the culprit, and bring justice amidst corruption. Over 2 hours of special features on Blu-ray, and I'm going to get to those in just a little bit. Now, I know that there are some people out there who are going to be more interested in the specs that are on the back and stuff like that. So it's a full 2160p Ultra HD disc. And it says it features a DTS, a HD master audio as well, and obviously it's got a runtime of 176 minutes. Just to show you the inside, okay, you've got the 4K disc, which is in black. You've got a standard Blu-ray disc and the special features disc. The special features disc is just your sort of standard Blu-ray disc. It's not 4K UHD. Now, like I say, just to mention the 4K transfer, obviously, we know that the film looks great. I'm not necessarily here to review the film. I've already done that on the channel before and on the podcast before. Myself, Ollie, and Ty got together and did the spoiler review. You can go back and watch that through the LinkedIn video at the end of this video. So the film obviously remains the same. The thing that's different, or the thing that was worth noticing here, is obviously this is the 4K transfer, and I'm watching it in a much kind of closer space. Now, it's a very dark film. We know it's a very dark film. Nothing has changed from that standpoint. And realistically, you're going to get the most out of watching this 4K version in as dark a room as possible, obviously on as best a TV as possible. Now, I've recently bought an OLED. Our old TV broke, all that kind of stuff. And the deep blacks really came through with that. And I think really that was only enhanced by the fact that I was in a dark room watching it again, because ultimately the dark cinematography, the dark colors, the dark color palette, the shadows, the mystery that sort of this, let's face it, noir superhero film exhibits and exudes is going to best come out with you watching it in as dark a room as possible. And it's not got the richness of color of something like Blade Runner 2049. It's got, there's the sort of the scene towards the end of the film where Batman lights the flare and stuff like that. That really pops out, and it looks actually visually quite striking. But again, this is more of a kind of darker film to watch it for those intricate, meticulous details that we're going to get to in just a little bit on the special features, but in the dark. But again, it's a really beautiful transfer. It sounds great as well. So I can recommend it for the transfer. Now, my main focus for this, the one thing that I really, really wanted to dig deep into were the special features, because obviously this is stuff that is at this point new to me, or when I was watching it. Now, I've essentially gone through the list of special features on the menu in order, apart from one, and I'll explain that when we get to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give you the title for the special feature. I'm going to give you the runtime of it, and then I'm going to give you a very quick sort of review synopsis type thing. So the first one is called Looking for Vengeance, and this is 4 minutes, 57 seconds. On a whole, it's a focus on the fight choreography with the fight and the stunt coordinators, but there are interesting tidbits looking into Bruce's psyche from the point of view of Robert Pattinson. So you hear Robert Pattinson speak about his point of view of Bruce's psyche and the decisions taken by the director, Matt Reeves, in terms of Bruce and Alfred's relationship. So it really kind of gives you a little bit of an insight into that. We then have Batman Genesis, which is 6 minutes and 9 seconds. So again, I watched these in order. So this was a bit of a strange jump back to the development of the film. So the first thing that you kind of come to on the special features is we're going to talk about the fight choreography. And then this is, we're now going to go back and we're going to talk about the development of the film, which is, it's kind of jarring. It's kind of strange. Like, I don't know if it's just the OCD in me that would sooner see everything in a sequential order, in like a chronological order, if that makes sense. So anyway, that's probably just a nitpick. So this again goes back to the development of the film. It includes Pattinson talking about making Tenet with Christopher Nolan, going for a screen test, which obviously must have been a weird position for him to be in, you know, making a film with an ex-Batman director and then essentially making a Batman film himself. Matt Reeves going for meetings with Warner Brothers that ultimately ended up meaning that he was going making Batman. Zoe Kravitz going in for what they called a chemistry read with Robert Pattinson. The makeup designer Naomi Dunn at one point discloses that Matt Reeves specifically cited Kurt Cobain as an aesthetic inspiration for this version of Batman and Bruce Wayne. And there's a really nice tidbit in there about Michael Giacchino's score as well. The next special feature is one called Vengeance Meets Justice, which is about 8 minutes and 4 seconds. This is the first bit of Riddler that we get in these special features. This is Paul Dano himself with a dual perspective of cast and crew discussing the Riddler's motivations and Batman's stance. So the idea here is that they're ultimately trying to give you what the cast and crew thought about each character, what they kind of really, you know, the intricacies into the development of these characters and what that meant from them making the film. Next one, again, another character orientated one. This is Becoming Catwoman, 8 minutes and 36 seconds. So this is Zoe Kravitz's journey to Selina Kyle, arguably the most iconic character in the film aside from Batman. The talking heads on her are all about her being a great fit. The first mentions of how they managed to sort of train and rehearse during COVID-19, because obviously it got shut down quite early on into 2020. The restrictions that they then had to work with afterwards, specifically with Catwoman. And despite the title of the featurette, the costume designer Jacqueline Duran actually states that we're not at Catwoman at this point. And what she means by that, or what I'm kind of understanding from that, is, and we'll come to this again a little bit later on, they're all very much of the opinion that, yes, this is early Batman. So he is Batman. It's just early Batman. So that in that sense, this character of Selina Kyle isn't quite Catwoman. She's not there yet. She's not there fully. Even going into people like Oswald, Oz Penguin, Oswald Cobblepot, he's not quite Penguin yet, is the kind of reference that, they make there. There's now a 10-minute and 51-second featurette on the Batmobile. So again, no huge insight here, but it's just a look into the design of the Batmobile, more into the design of how they were able to produce 3 copies of the vehicle. And one of them was an electrical version for whatever reason. Again, it's quite interesting. 2 anatomy ones now. So the anatomy of the car chase, 6 minutes, 8 seconds. Very interesting look at the car chase sequence between Batman and Penguin. Provides a lot of detail on the unique way of how they filmed it, in which they used 7 cameras pointing in all different directions to record moving traffic on this closed road or this set that they had, and then incorporating the damage to other cars as well, so the crashes that you see in the sequence, and then using rear projection screens while they went back and shot again to then add more footage in of the actors. So if you imagine, they've shot something with 7 different cameras, all pointing in different directions, and then they've gone back on set, and instead of using a green screen and then superimposing it, what they've done is they've shot the sequence again, or they've shot close-ups on Colin Farrand's face, they've shot close-ups on Robert Pattinson's face, and around them were these sort of LED rear projection screens, which they used multiple times during the filming, I think, for different things, and just played the footage on the screens rather than green screen it, which ultimately I think makes it look better. I couldn't have told you that was essentially, for lack of a better word, a green screen, because it wasn't. It was rear projection. So it's just a different way of doing it. And I remember someone tweeting around about the time that they find it interesting that this film in 2022, when it was released, has gone back to rear projection, which was back in the day, more of a thing that Hollywood did rather than green screens, because obviously they didn't have the technology at the time. You then get another anatomy sequence, and this is anatomy of the wingsuit jump. Now, this was a scene that I think when I watched it, this is about 6.5 minutes, it seemed to take a couple of people out of the film, I think, where it's a bit of a strange jump. It's a bit, it's Batman on top of the building, the police building, and he sort of has this aerial wingsuit that morphs around him, and he jumps off, does this glide, and then absolutely bails it at the end. But I'm glad that basically they've showed it, because it shows us that he's not a perfect Batman, because again, at this point, and this is something that the cast and crew keep reiterating through these special features, he's only early Batman. So we're allowed to see him fail at this point. They wanted to do a real jump. They wanted to have somebody actually jump out of the plane, but the pandemic and the restrictions afterwards scuppered those plans. They switched to a set on a soundstage. They basically, and again, this was another fascinating way of doing it. They recorded drone footage in Chicago, as in the point of view that you see Batman gliding with the wingsuit is all drone footage shot in Chicago. And then they went to exterior shots of the Liver building in Liverpool, matched the two together. They then had a stunt coordinator take the fall at the end and then stitch them all together again. So it's very interesting for that. The one that I didn't get to in chronological order, and I'll explain why in a second, is Vengeance in the Making. I'm going to come to that in just a little bit. So the one after that one is Unpacking the Icons. This is 5 minutes and 47 seconds. So again, they're all relatively short. They're all around about 10 minutes-ish. I expected this to be about the icons as in the characters, but it's more focused on the mise-en-scène of the film. So it's the costume, it's the props, it's the decisions and the collaborations between costume designers, between actors and the director to create the overall looks for each character. And again, this is a point where the costume designer reiterates that Selina Kyle is not yet Catwoman. And it's also the first appearance up to this point on the special features where we get Colin Farrell discussing Penguin, which brings us nicely onto the next one, a 7-minute 59 featurette called A Transformation, the Penguin. Now, this is very specifically Mike Marino and Mike Fontaine, who are the prosthetics artists and the makeup artists, discussing the prosthetics, discussing the process. Matt Reeves disclosing, again, that Penguin, this version of the Penguin character, is not yet the Kingpin that we're used to him being. So it's reiterating again that this is all still very early. So there's very clearly a world that's been built here by Matt Reeves and his team. It's very clear to us that everything that we're seeing up to this point is very, very early on. So hopefully with the sequels, we're going to get a little bit more development in that. One thing to mention about the Penguin feature as well, it was really great to see Colin Farrell talking about his processes with the character as well. Him talking about how he wanted him to come across in a certain way. He wanted to have certain mannerisms, him looking in the mirror even to get used to the prosthetics and work his mouth in a certain way, begin to work his speech in a certain way to really fit into it. Probably the most, I would say, interesting part, I think it's the part that typical cinephiles usually go to first with special features, are the two deleted scenes. Now, you can watch these with or without commentary. The commentary is just Matt Reeves talking over the top. I did both. I watched them with and without, so I can give you a little bit of an insight on that. So the first one is what they refer to as Scene 52, and they call it Joker / Arkham. And the kind of tidbit that you get, the little description is Batman visits an unnamed prisoner in Arkham Asylum. Now, this is the clip that everyone's already seen. This is the clip that they released onto YouTube and onto Twitter and onto social media shortly after the film was released. And it gives you a bit of added context into where it fits into the film. Because if I'm honest, the one that was released to social media doesn't really disclose where it's included in the film. But actually, this includes a little bit beforehand. So it's actually happens after Jim Gordon and Batman have discovered the bring him into the light and the rat clue. It's when they've read the card and it says, I'm mad about you. And basically, straight after that, Batman then goes to Arkham to speak to Joker about Riddler. Now, if I'm honest, when I first saw this scene, I thought, okay, of course they shot it. Of course it's another Jokery type thing. And I kind of, I took it as it was. I think me and Ollie spoke about how we'd be interested to see where it fit into the film. And obviously we get that here. Now that I've seen it again, and now that I've seen it with context on the disc, I think this should have stayed in the actual final film. I was at first a bit down on the inclusion of having Joker in the film, and especially that original scene. So the scene, spoilers if you've not seen it, where Riddler is in his cell towards the end and you hear the voice, you hear the laugh, you hear all that kind of stuff. I felt it was a bit tacked on when I watched it at the cinema, and I felt that it again was potentially a studio request to once again include this iconic character, the Crown Prince of Crime, this idea that again we're going to rely on him because for whatever reason, probably since Heath Ledger's Joker, there's become a lot more reliance on Joker as a character in Batman lore. So even the Arkham games, I love the Arkham games, but you didn't need Joker in Arkham Knight. You didn't really need him in Arkham City. And again, I think there's been a bit too much reliance on Joker, and I felt that they were doing it again with this iteration of Batman. But I think with this scene, it would have added so much more in the narrative where it was positioned or where it was intended to be positioned, and actually built more to the new world of this Batman than the other scene did do. Matt Reeves' commentary actually discloses that he wanted to reference characters that we as the audience are all aware of and are aware that live in Gotham, or at least, in the city, or are, for lack of a better word, the rogues gallery of Gotham, I suppose. But again, this echoes the story of these features where Matt Reeves says this isn't the final iteration of the Joker. He basically says he is just the person that would soon become the Joker. But all that happened at this point is that in year one of Batman's story or journey at this point, he had a run-in with Batman. He did something that made him fall into Arkham. And at that point, he's not referring to himself as Joker, and that something has happened there along the way. So again, I think there's more development coming there, probably, if not in the next film, because again, I'm holding out for Freeze in the next one, but the one after that, if this ends up being a trilogy, which it probably will be. So that was a lot on that scene. The other deleted scene is what they refer to as scene 56. And this is Selina gets the 44 below key card. And the description here is Selina has a brief rendezvous with Oz. This is a much shorter scene than the prison sequence. Selina goes into the Iceberg Lounge. She's wearing Batman's retina can at this point. So again, it's as she's going through and Batman is seeing everything through the retina cam. It's completely inconsequential in that if it was in the film, it makes no difference really. Selina goes straight to 44 below. She doesn't have to go and get the key card. But Matt Reeves is in his commentary justifies why he wanted to keep it in. And he said that actually the intention for this little tidbit of a scene was to provide a bit more context into Oz's psyche of being the second man behind Falcone, almost, I suppose, to use the analogy that it's always been the bridesmaid and never the bride, in that he wanted to try and get that across, and wanting more than what life was giving him at that point. He was sad to cut it. Matt Reeves was sad to cut it because he thought it added more depth to Penguin, but he knew that he needed to move the film on. And the final thing to mention, I'm going back now, this is Vengeance in the Making. Now, the reason why I left this one till last, and I didn't do it in chronological order, is because it's 53 minutes and 41 seconds. It's referred to as being the main documentary on the set. And for me, again, chronological order, OCD and all that kind of stuff, it's a bit weird that it's positioned in the middle of the menu due to its length. So I purposely watched this last. I actually only watched this today. As I record this, I watched everything else sort of through the week and whatever. It starts off very intriguingly, if that's even a word, where we start in another world, essentially. And by another world, I'm being metaphorical and a bit Nicholas Winding Refn on the back of that Drive DVD. Pretentious, that's the word I was looking for. It took me a while. In the by another world, I mean, it's 20th of January 2020, Leavesden Warner Brothers Studios. Not even pre-production at that point. You're talking costume tests, you're talking development with Robert Pattinson, Matt Reeves, and Zoe Kravitz. Matt Reeves' excitement, I should say, is infectious. The graphic comes on the screen that actually production was due to start a week later and last for 5 months. But then obviously COVID happened. So it's interesting to see from the tidbits that you get of how they managed to restart, what they did when they went back to restarting. Obviously, they had months off between the production points of starting and going back again. It's very, very clear that Matt Reeves wanted this film to be a different take. He wanted to develop on our prior knowledge. He trusts the audience that we know who Batman is, that we know who these characters are, and actually, let's try and do something a little bit different now. Even Pattinson at one point during the talking head bit alludes to the fact that there are plot points in the film that aren't even in the comic books, that they're wholly new concepts. And I'm not that big of a comic aficionado. Like, I've got a couple of them, I've read a couple of them, but I'd be very intrigued to understand what has come from the comics and what was Matt Reeves's sort of new concept. Obviously, certain aspects with the Riddler are pretty obvious. This essentially brings all the talking heads together. There's a couple of elements that are repeated from other special features on the disc. So the Kurt Cobain stuff is mentioned here again, and they've used some of the same footage again. It introduces some new talking heads, including John Turturro, which was a very nice introduction or sort of inclusion in this documentary, because hearing him talk about Carmine Falcone, and weirdly, the casting director going to Matt Reeves and saying, well, who do you want for Carmine Falcone? And he said, top of my wish list would be John Turturro. For me, and I don't know if it's just the films that I've seen him in, as Jesus in The Big Lebowski, and as the bumbling FBI agent in the Transformers films, I wouldn't have thought John Turturro was absolute slimeball mafia boss. I mean, he nails it. Me and Ollie spoke about this on the Spoiler podcast. I think this is the best performance in the film, John Turturro. So it's really good for me, anyway, to see him talking about Carmine and talking about his development into that character. It's a genuinely interesting watch. It's ultimately for anyone who watched this film, who watched the Batman, fell in love with the aesthetic, and is interested in the thought processes that went into the making of the film, and to hear about how people took certain things, how they began to develop the characters. It seems to have been a very, very collaborative nature on set, in that Matt Reeves is allowing actors to sort of suggest certain things to him, and then he runs with it. And obviously, these are the people that are going to be playing them for months. So obviously he's allowing them to bring their own little intricacies and their own little interpretations in to ultimately affect these characters. So a lot of talking, a lot of stuff to get through. But that is essentially this very nice Batman set. I'm very much looking forward to going back and watching it again. My wife still hasn't seen it, so as of time of recording, this is what we're watching tomorrow night. And yeah, it's a very good film. My review is on the Spoiler podcast, but even the transfer is great, especially if you can watch it in as dark as room as possible. I'm aware that I'm recording this in June, and nighttime is 9:30 at night when the sun goes down. So realistically, you get in a dark room before 10 o'clock at night isn't exactly ideal, especially for a 3-hour film. But yeah, great set. I recommend you pick it up. So once again, it is available currently on digital download, but on Monday, this coming Monday, the 13th of June, as a time of recording, it is also available to buy on 4K UHD, looking like this, Blu-ray, DVD, and VOD. Thank you very much once again to Warner Brothers for sending me this. Very much appreciated it. I may have mentioned this in the drive review. I don't know if I did do. I've had COVID again this week. This is the second time I've had COVID. So I've been off work for 4 days. I went back in today for the first day, thankfully, to see my year 11s before they went on study leave. So this got me through a good couple of days of COVID this week. So I very, very much appreciated it, even more than I would have done had it just landed anyway with a postie. So thank you very much again for checking this out. I highly recommend that you go and give Batman a go. Again, if you've not seen it, if you have seen it, go and check it out again. If you've not seen it, just go and check it out. If you're a cinephile like me, if you love your 4K stuff, it's highly recommended to go and check out this disc. And I'm sure you can get it from all good resellers, including wbshop.co.uk. I know they've got a couple of special things on there. I will admit I have another copy on the way, not one that looks like that. I'm a Riddler fan, I'm a big Riddler fan, so I couldn't help myself but ordering that HMV exclusive steelbook that has a little bit of Riddler art in it. So I don't know, I might do an unboxing for that. I don't know, it's just a steelbook. If you fancy it, yeah, I'll do it. Right, whatever. So in the meantime, I've not said what I'm doing next. I don't really know what I'm doing next. On the channel coming soon, on the YouTube channel, I'm going to upload the Harry Potter chats that I had with film critic Tom Beasley, who is a name that my students will recognize from the Whiplash Specialist Writing. And on the podcast feed, there is Ollie and Holly's and mine top 10 animated films that we actually recorded before Christmas, and I've just pushed it off with everything else that we've done in between. I'm going watching Jurassic Park, Jurassic World Dominion over the weekend, so I might end up doing a review for that, although some people seem to have been a bit sniffy. I'm hoping that it is just essentially a film about dinosaurs. chasing after people, because that's how I want it to be. So we'll see what happens next. Thank you very much for watching this one. Go back and watch the Drive unboxing. Go back and watch any other videos on the channel. Get the views up there. Thank you very much for subscribing. Stay safe. Look after each other. Go over to the sponsor off World Tees. I know one of my students picked me up on saying this on the YouTube channel today. Go over to the sponsor off World Tees. Use the code Farrand. That's FARRAND for 15% off your order. They've just added a load of Stranger Things inspired designs, one of which I'm very interested in looking into. Currently watching Stranger Things at the minute, finishing it tonight. So stay safe, look after each other, and I will see you next time.